If you're a Warriors fan, you know that feeling. Days of hope, days of frustration, and that doubt that haunts you every time the team seems stuck. Does the management really have a clear plan, or are we just trying to buy time? Because one thing is certain, this soap opera has already tired the fans. But today we finally have the answer everyone was waiting for. And it's not internet guesswork. It's information that changes the way we see what's coming, what could happen to the cast, and what the next real step is for this era. Stay with me because I'm going to show you what this means in practice, and why this outcome could be the beginning of a turning point. Before revealing the answer that was missing to close this story, subscribe to the channel because from now on the sequence of news and rumors will get even heavier and you won't want to miss any updates. Leave a like to strengthen the Warriors content here on YouTube and show me that this type of video is what you want to see every day. Hit the bell because when this next piece of information explodes, you'll want to be one of the first to know. And stay with me until the end, because in addition to what has come out now, I will connect the signs, show the real impact on the cast, and what this paves the way for the next movements. Now let's go straight to what every fan has been waiting for. If you follow the Warriors with your heart in your hand, you know exactly what a night like yesterday means. It's not just an ordinary defeat. It's the kind of game that seems written to test the fans' patience to the limit. Because the team had control, had the advantage, had the moment. And suddenly everything escapes through details that hurt even more because they were avoidable. A rebound that cannot be missed. A last possession that cannot be interrupted like that. A defensive failure that leaves the path clear for a simple conclusion. And when you combine this in a tight end game, the weight becomes different. What bothers most is not just the final score. It's the feeling that this team is living on a knife's edge. And for the first time this season, reality clashed with the speech at the beginning of the year. The Warriors are below 50%. And I know that this messes with any fan's head, because it changes the atmosphere of conversations, changes the tone of analysis, and, most importantly, changes the level of demand. And here comes a very sensitive point: injuries. When Steph is away, when Jimmy is away, and when there is a real possibility that Draymond will be away for longer, everything snowballs. There's no way to pretend that this doesn't change the team's identity. There's no way to pretend that the rotation can take the hit in the same way. And it's normal for you to look at this scenario and wonder who is steering this ship in the right way. The question that naturally arises is uncomfortable but necessary. Whose responsibility is it when such an experienced team appears so vulnerable? Is it the technician? Is it from the board? Is it a mix of the two? Because we are not talking about a young squad under construction, which is still learning how to win. We are talking about a franchise with title DNA, accustomed to big decisions and moments of pressure. And at the same time, I recognize that there is a positive side within this chaos. The team ended up losing by 24 points and sought the game again. This is no small feat. This shows competitiveness. Shows that the group still has a fire burning when the match demands its maximum. And this type of reaction does not appear by chance. There is a sporting character there. There is pride. There are people who don't accept falling anyway. But this good part cannot serve as an excuse for what comes later. Because you can even praise the courage of the recovery, but you can't ignore what decides the story. And the story was decided in detail, in the adjustment that didn't come, in the defensive reading that didn't happen, in the lack of firmness on a ball that needed to be ours. And that's why frustration increases, because the fans are not demanding a miracle. He is doing the basics well in the minutes that separate a victory that heals from a defeat that opens a wound. When you look at the team on the court, especially with so many absences, rotation becomes an inevitable theme. And I understand the discomfort of seeing a quintet with Draymond Green, Al Horford, Moses Moody, Pods, and Will Richard trying to support a huge weight, because it is not a simple individual criticism, is the bigger question. Does this combination put you in the best possible chance of winning tough games? Moody has good moments, but it also fluctuates. Will Richard has been consistent in some areas. Pods, which many people believe, has been alternating good nights with nights in which it doesn't deliver enough. And then you look at cold numbers like 20 minutes and 6 points with 2 out of 8 shooting, and you understand why fans feel helpless. Because a bad start it's just a bad start. He changes the opponent's stance, changes the squad's confidence, changes the margin for error that was already small. And when the entire team shoots below 30% in the first half, it stops being an isolated problem, becomes a warning. Because you can't survive a long season in such a strong league, living off heroic reactions every week. At some point, this extra effort takes its toll, and the account often appears on the body of its leaders. This is where I think the most important discussion is not just about who is hurt, but about why they get hurt, because there is a huge difference between an inevitable injury and an injury caused by load, by a poorly distributed function, by a lack of tactical and squad protection. And when you don't have substitutes who can maintain the minimum level of command of the game, you push your pillars into risky situations. When Steph leaves and you rely on pieces that are good but aren't natural organizers, you lose control. When Draymond has to face a 7-footer in constant physical battles, you increase the chance of an impact that changes weeks of the season. When the 39-year-old Horford is forced to sustain duels against younger, stronger centers for long periods of time, you're playing with the safety margin of someone who already deserves to be used more intelligently. And that's why I return to the question that doesn't want to be silenced. Why was this squad so loaded with point guards and so lacking in real big-box solutions? Because, in theory, you want versatility. But there is a point where versatility becomes imbalance. And the league today does not forgive teams that try to win without enough muscle in the places where the game matters most. I also need to recognize an important detail. Not everything that seemed like a problem is proving to be the way we imagined. D'Anthony Mountain, for example, played a very important role in yesterday's turnaround. And that's good to see because it shows that there is still room for positive surprises. Sometimes the initial read on a player doesn't capture what he can offer when the game demands courage and presence. However, at the same time, this moment of the season also reveals another layer of competitive truth. When defeats accumulate, it becomes easier to identify who is truly committed to the greater objective and who tends to get lost in individual decisions. I don't need to demonize anyone to say that. It's a normal dynamic for teams under pressure. Some pieces respond with maturity, others respond with anxiety. And that's where a lot of people focus on names like Kuminga, Pods, and occasionally Moody. Sometimes because of fit, sometimes because of cost-benefit, sometimes because of the feeling that there are players delivering more with less spotlight and less salary. And as harsh as it may seem, this is part of the NBA's logic. Contract is also a board piece. And in moments of urgency, what you can move carries enormous weight in internal conversations. If you ask me what the most delicate point in all of this is, I would say it's not just the possibility of exchanges. It's the feeling that the team needs a clear identity decision, because with the health of the Big Three threatened, the Warriors need to know whether they will build a protection network around them or whether they will continue to trust that the strength of history will compensate for the shortcomings of the present. Because it's one thing to hope that Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond come back well. It's another thing to create a scenario in which they don't need to return as saviors in a state of emergency. What this team needs is real support to not depend on continuous heroics. And real support, in this case, starts in the big box, starts in the minutes that stabilize the defense, starts in the type of pivot that commands respect, protects the rim, defines firm blocks, and helps organize the game when the marking doubles on the perimeter. And this connects with the uncomfortable feeling that fans have had. Are we looking at a playoff team or a team that, as it stands, is at risk of slipping into the lottery zone? Because being below 50% early in the season doesn't define everything, but it shines a light that's hard to ignore. And this light says, the shore has become dangerous. Now I know there is another topic that has ignited the comments, the idea of firing coach Steve Kerr. And I understand the impulse. When fans are hurt by defeats like this, they look for a breaking point, a change that seems immediate, a response that gives back hope. And the coach is always the most visible target. But if I'm completely honest with you, I don't see this decision as the smartest solution right now. Not because Kerr is untouchable, but because the next question is cruel. Who would put this team on a title track with more consistency right now? Because what Kerr represents, for better or for worse, is a system that was once champion. It's with this nucleus, an environment that the Stars trust, and a level of locker room management that is not easily replaced along the way. This does not preclude legitimate criticism. Rotation could be bolder. Development of some parts could have been better. And the James Wiseman case always comes back to the table as a symbol of this frustration. But even here there is nuance. Many people use the "we could have LaMelo Ball" argument as if this were an automatic path to success. But the reality is more complex. Even though LaMelo is talented, the profile of a winner that fits the Warriors doesn't just depend on skill. It depends on reading the game, on defensive commitment, on the ability to play without turning each night into a personal showcase. And you know this. This team has always worked better with stars who accept the system's hierarchy and with supporting players who understand the value of detail. In the end, the discussion, Kerr or board, it seems like a 50-50 split to me, because a coach needs the right pieces to execute a vision, and a board needs to understand the type of squad that supports the coach's principles. When this synergy fails, the team loses identity. And the feeling is exactly what the fan has been describing. Something hasn't been clicking as it should for a few years. Which is why I think the answer fans have been waiting for isn't just about a specific name or an isolated decision. It's about the full picture of the moment. The Warriors are at a crossroads of urgency and legacy. They need to protect what is still possible with Steph at the top of a competitive project, without pretending that only the strength of the past will win games in April and May. And we also need to be realistic about another topic that always comes up: changing Draymond. I understand the fatigue of those who get irritated by the techniques, by the intensity that sometimes goes beyond the limit, by the physical risks they take in unequal confrontations. But when we go from emotional to pragmatic, the question is simple: which team today will make room to take on this complete package? Draymond is historic, decisive, essential to the Warriors' defensive identity, but he is also a player with increasing age, who requires the right context to perform and who carries a strong reputation. It's not the type of negotiation that happens easily unless a very specific, very unusual scenario arises, with a franchise desperate for highly impactful veteran leadership. So, like it or not, everything indicates that he will remain part of that nucleus until something truly extraordinary changes the cast's logic. And this is not an emotional opinion. It's market reading. At this point, I return to what I consider the main thing. The team needs to look in the mirror and act before injuries and a lack of structural balance turn a difficult season into a lost season. Because it's one thing to go through a bad moment waiting for the leaders to return. It's another thing to keep these leaders exposed to repeated risks due to lack of support. Putting Steph in a position to succeed involves giving him a pivot that makes the game breathe. A guy who offers consistent blocks, physical presence, and quick reading to take advantage of defensive folds. Putting Jimmy in a position to succeed requires a big box that stretches the rival defense and opens up space for controlled infiltrations and more successful shots. Putting Draymond in a position to succeed involves not demanding physical battles from him that don't need to be his when the squad could absorb part of that shock. And yes, this can change with health, with adjustments, and with smarter minutes for pieces like Quentin Post. Increasing his time may make sense if the idea is to give him real rotation, starter rhythm, and confidence to sustain part of the big game. But this only really works if the board also makes the complementary move, offering the right tools so this team doesn't depend on weekly miracles. The scenario is not decided. The season still has room for a substantial turnaround, but the current moment calls for lucidity, calls for strategic courage. It asks for a clear choice between continuing to tinker and actually reinforcing what is missing. And if you've made it this far, I want you to think about one last idea with me. Perhaps this phase is the exact point at which the Warriors need to prove that they still have a real path to contention. Not only due to the strength of their historical names, but due to the intelligence of the decisions they are going to make now. Because what separates a competitive veteran team from a slumping veteran team is how quickly it recognizes its holes and how firmly it closes each of them. This is the conversation worth having. Without panic, without fantasy, without looking for a single culprit to alleviate the pain. The fan deserves an analysis that respects the greatness of what this team has been, but also takes seriously what it needs be from now on. And that is exactly why this answer is so important, because it's not just about yesterday's game. It's about what the Warriors will choose to be when the season enters the phase where no one forgives weakness. And that's what makes everything even more serious and at the same time electrifying. The Warriors have reached that point in the season where every decision has a bearing on the future. It's not just about reacting in the next game. It's about protecting the backbone of this team, fixing the flaws that are screaming, and preventing a string of injuries and crooked choices from turning a season of struggle into a season of regret. Because when a team with the history of the Warriors starts to falter in detail, the league doesn't wait for you to organize yourself. She goes over it. So keep an eye out, because this story is far from over, and what comes now could define the direction of the cast, the tone of the coming weeks, and even the real level of ambition that the franchise will assume from now on. Now, if you want to continue this line of news, behind the scenes and hot rumors without missing absolutely anything, the Golden State Warriors News Today playlist is already in the pinned comment. Click there and watch, because the next videos connect everything that is happening now, explain the possible scenarios, and always keep you one step ahead of what will explode on the networks. If the season has become a test by fire, this playlist is your daily checkpoint.